Hey, look at those guys.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just get my notes up here so that I can be somewhat useful in the show. Okay. Good morning, TK.
Good morning, Darryl.
How are
All right,
you?
we're back at it. I'm good. Things
Still-
are okay.
Still rocking the goatee.
Yeah, so this is still stage 2 of my reopening.
Stage
And,
2 of your reopening. You see, I
Got my last haircut.
I was thinking this morning, funny enough, about your goatee, and I was
Okay.
see,
Cautioning you.
I like to think of myself as someone who can spot trends, and so
Okay.
I've noticed a direct correlation between the amount of infections in Ontario and the amount of facial hair that you have. See, way back you had a full beard, and this place was like going down hard. And then
believe
you
I noticed
shaved
that
it. You went to goatee, and all of a sudden we had like half the cases every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And
mean,
now
Doug
I see
Ford
the
talked about
goatee's getting a little trimmer, and the
Yeah.
cases seem to be going
Lower.
down still. So we'll have
The
to
lower.
monitor
Yeah.
this event.
Number 5 setting on the beard trimmer, and once stage 3 reopens, it's going to be gone, and we're
Gone.
going to be fully open in business. We got to show that we are being safe, and this is just added layer, so it's an additional filter on my mask, right? So there's a lot of theory that has been put into this, and this is my last home haircut that I've received. My wife and I discussed, so I will be going back to the barber coming the next week or two.
We also had a discussion about haircuts and inviting our hairdresser to the house while the weather was good enough to be able to do it outside.
Yes. And how'd that go? Is it gonna work
Well,
out?
I mean, it's on the table at the moment.
It's on
My
the table.
son has an afro right now.
It's okay. Haircuts are coming to the Frankfurt house very soon. I can feel it.
I think
Yeah.
you could be right. I don't want
That's
to.
awesome. What do we
I don't want to.
what do we got on the table today? I know you sent me a bunch of stuff and you had an order of it.
I sent you a whole bunch of stuff, and I do have an
Yeah.
order. And
Great.
before we get
Glad one of us is
too
organized.
deep, I just want to be able to pull out our new friend's name.
Okay.
Our first comment, and I was thinking this morning, how wonderful that our first comment was positive.
We're communicating with the outside world. Absolutely.
We are hitting a nerve out there.
No, I think actually the first comment was a guy who commented that
Oh, big crash ahead.
the market's gonna crash.
No,
So,
I think
that's so positive.
actually the first comment was me commenting on how wonderful you are.
Okay. Our first real valued comment is positive. So very deep and informative. And
I value
yeah,
it
well,
0% the first one. This one, however, by Brian Jordan, I
you go.
value considerably. So
Okay.
Brian really wanted us to kind of focus on the rental market because he owns some rental condos downtown and he's having a
Yeah.
little bit of a tough time. So I promised him in writing that we would definitely touch on that today. I know you did some research so that you can make sure that our one fan is happy after today's podcast. So we will
Absolutely.
get into that. But I think we need to build things up a little bit so that we can really dive into the rental story. So
Absolutely.
before we get into anything about the real estate market, and this does touch on the real estate market, but I think it's important to talk about because we did touch on it in our first show.
I know where you're going with
Rowdy Tellez has paid his rent.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
Now,
That's
do you
big deal.
think that non-payment of rent situation had anything to do with Vladimir Guerrero moving over to first base, basically ruining Rowdy Tellez's career in Toronto?
I'm not following as much baseball as I have in the past, but I would say that there is definitely going to be some outside influences to protect his brand here in Toronto, and paying that rent is definitely one of them.
He
So-
is paid in full now. Now that Vladdy's at first, he is paid in full. Okay, one other thing I wanted to touch on that I thought was really cool that happened in Toronto this week. I witnessed it live via YouTube. So it kind of combines two really cool things together. So we've talked about him a few times, Mr. Caboose, Charles Caboose, the big nightclub and restaurateur in Toronto, opened up the City View Drive-In down at the I guess the old government building down at the docks at Cherry Beach, Portland area there. So he opened up the parking lot with this amazing stage and this crazy LED screen that you can see perfectly during the day. And so what happened there is to open the thing up, they did a launch for 199 Church Street condominium launch. So they had all of the platinum agents and people sign up to come to this event. They had 200 car occupancy, and they scattered the cars in the parking lot, and every second row, like everything was scattered, kind of like a checkerboard, and they had this big like festival concert style pump up MLM presentation for selling the condos.
Perfect.
And other than like some technical glitches with the streaming, it was kind of cool.
Of course. Yeah, they got to start somewhere and learn and figure out all the kinks, and then they can open it up commercially, right?
But there's a testament there to Toronto entrepreneurship and real estate kind of mixed in together, because you have two things kind of going on having firsts. Well, I guess a drive-in in downtown Toronto is not a first, but nobody really went to them before this whole thing happened, did they? Did you go to them recently?
A drive-in?
Yeah.
In Toronto? No. But
Anywhere?
I think yeah, up north there's some ones that I know about. But the thing is with something like that is, you need to get on board with a corporate sponsor, right? So that he needed to have some sort of in this case a developer be able to attribute some value to having the crowds and the attention and the media and everything like that. And who better to go to than a new condominium right in the area?
Yeah, I wonder who thought of it. I wonder whose idea it was to do a condo launch like that.
I'm sure there's lots of guys, like he's pretty connected in that world, so that's fine.
I thought it was pretty cool. So before we get to our main topic of Toronto rents, let's paint a picture. We've got a lot of stuff this week talking about how strong the Toronto resale market is. We've got all kinds of stuff. This one is mind-boggling. The headline is Canadian real estate prices grew over 29 times the rate of U.S. home prices.
Yeah.
And so, again, I mean, I hate bringing up stuff about Canada that's broad because Toronto is so different and independent of Canada. But if Canadian real estate prices grew over 29 times the rate of U.S. home prices, like what did Toronto do compared to U.S. home prices?
Well, the Toronto numbers and Vancouver's numbers are the reason why that number is so high, right? This is not, it might be the average Canadian, but Toronto and Vancouver basically carry the entire Canadian market on their shoulders.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing that I took away from that. And, the index that they used to, I mean, I think that was a headline grabber. I mean, we know that when it's talking about 29 times, I mean, we're not talking about like a price metric or anything like that. We're just looking at a growth metric and talking about adjusted based on inflation. And so, you're not talking about 20 times value. Your dollar wouldn't have earned $29 if it was in one market compared to another. They're just talking about the growth.
Yeah, and it's since 2008 or 2009 in comparison, which I mean still 29 times great growth over that time period compared to a world power or the world power is pretty impressive numbers and pretty crazy. But still, yeah, definitely an attention grabber 29 times. But they did actually quantify it. I mean, I can make up any number and quantify it with some amount of data in real estate. I mean, there's so much data to manipulate. It's crazy. So
one question I had though, that came up in my head when I was going over that was socially, right? Like, what's the social benefits of the way that the U.S. had to deal with the Great Recession, and they had the housing market crash, and they had the rejigging of their banking system and everything like that? where do they stand today, and are they stronger today because of that? And is it, and as Canadians, are we weaker because we had the benefits of a stronger financial system and banking system back then, which has now gotten us to this point with this huge household debt and with these low affordability measures and everything like that in our major cities. So, like socially, like they had mass homelessness and job loss and business loss and death, suicides, that kind of stuff, health problems, all that kind of stuff comes when you have major economic collapses like that and everything else. So socially, are they better off today, or are we better off because of it? And that's something that I don't have the figures on, but the main thing is it seems like that's something to consider.
Well, when you compare getting $2,000 a month per person that can't make money anymore to, I think they're like $1,200 in the States, and they're having a hell of a time actually getting the money. And yeah, it was for way less time, and it's way worse there, right?
They got times the population though, right? So you gotta factor that in too, that the Canadian government was willing to support us because when they crunched the numbers, they said that's a debt that we're willing to take on.
I think the actual decision is really easy for most countries right now, because as long as you're printing money in proportion to what the United States is doing, your currency can't go down.
True.
Right? So as long
True.
as you're pegging that printing press in
Yeah.
relation or proportion to what they're doing, there's no effect here.
Yeah.
Right? And
Also,
so in Canada, they loosen the restrictions on people for what they can borrow when it comes to housing. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. It's like Canadians, Torontonians, I mean, we're putting most of our money and debt into something tangible, something real. We're not buying Lamborghinis, and we're not buying, Gucci, apparel for our kids and Rolexes for our kids. We're not all, I mean, some people definitely are, but like as a culture, it's not the same. Right? So their debt is all university or college debt and consumer debt. And ours is in most part, or a great deal of, tied to an asset. And that just allows us to ring up more debt or scarier levels of debt. Like this other article I'm looking at here, what housing crash? Toronto smashes its housing record. And these are guys that have been calling for a crash forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't, this market, no matter what you put onto it, it defies all logic. Because the
Yeah, there's
the
definitely
demand
a
and
lot of
supply is just so out of balance.